I never meant to fall for her. She was my friend's mom, graceful, untouchable. But the night she caught me staring, and whispered, "Don't look at me like that," I couldn't hold back the truth, "Then stop looking so beautiful." That's when everything changed. I never expected that a casual visit to my friend's house would end up changing something inside me. It was a late Saturday afternoon, the air outside still carrying the warmth of the sun, and I remember walking up the familiar pathway to their door. I had been there plenty of times before, always just a place where laughter, video games, and casual hangouts filled the hours. But that day felt different. The door opened, and there she was. My friend's mom. She didn't do anything dramatic, nothing that should have stood out. She was simply herself, elegant in a way that felt natural, not forced. She wore a soft cardigan over a light blouse, her hair pinned up with a few strands falling loose around her face. But it wasn't her clothes I noticed first. It was the warmth in her smile, the calm way her eyes met mine, and the effortless grace with which she carried herself. "Hey, come in," she said softly, her voice calm but firm, the kind of tone that made you feel both welcome and cautious at the same time. I stepped inside, the familiar scent of her home wrapping around me. A mix of fresh coffee and something faintly floral, her perfume, maybe. My friend was still upstairs, so it was just her and me in that moment, standing in the quiet hallway. She asked how I'd been, just polite conversation, but the way she listened made me feel seen in a way I hadn't expected. When my friend finally came down, I tried to shift my focus, but my eyes kept finding their way back to her without meaning to. At the table, as we all sat down for a light snack she had prepared, I caught myself noticing the little details, how she tucked her hair behind her ear as she laughed at something, how her hands moved with an easy grace as she poured tea. I didn't mean to stare, it just happened. Something about her presence had a gravity that pulled me in. And every time our eyes met, even for just a fraction of a second, I felt a jolt, like there was something there neither of us wanted to acknowledge. I brushed it off, told myself I was imagining things. She was older, confident, out of reach. But deep down, a spark had already been lit. One that I couldn't put out, no matter how much I tried to ignore it. And I think, maybe she felt it too. Dinner that evening should have felt ordinary. Just a meal with my friend, his mom, and the easy background chatter of cutlery against plates. But from the very beginning, something felt charged. I sat across from her at the table, and though I tried to keep my focus on the food in front of me, my eyes kept drifting, almost against my will. The way the soft light from the ceiling lamp caught in her hair, the quiet curve of her smile when she asked if I wanted more rice, even the gentle way she listened to her son's stories, all of it seemed to hold me. I told myself to stop looking, to keep it casual, to blend into the rhythm of family conversation. But each time I lifted my eyes, I found hers already there, waiting. It wasn't intentional, I don't think. It was more like gravity, pulling us into the same orbit without permission. At first, she held my gaze for only a second before glancing down at her plate. But as the meal went on, those seconds stretched longer. And with each passing glance, the silence between us grew heavier. Finally, it happened. I'd been watching her as she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She must have felt the weight of my stare, because she suddenly looked up, her eyes locking with mine in a way that made the room feel smaller. And then she spoke. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge beneath it, half a warning, half a confession. "Don't stare at me like that." For a moment, the words froze me in place. My fork paused halfway to my mouth, and my heart gave a sharp, nervous beat. The air between us felt thick, as though everyone at the table had heard, though I knew only she and I understood the weight of it. I should have apologized. I should have laughed it off, brushed it aside, let it vanish into the flow of the evening. But something in her expression, half serious, half teasing, made me bolder than I thought I could be. So I leaned back slightly, forced a small, nervous smile, and said the only thing that came to mind. "Then stop looking so beautiful." The table went quiet for just a heartbeat. Her son didn't seem to notice, already distracted by his phone. But she did. Her cheeks warmed, and for the briefest second, her lips parted in surprise. Then she looked down quickly, hiding her face in a sip of water. I felt my own chest tighten, not with regret, but with the terrifying thrill of what I had just admitted without meaning to. And in that silence, I knew we had both crossed an invisible line. After dinner, the house grew quieter. My friend had slipped back upstairs, leaving his mom to clear the table on her own. I hesitated for a moment, sitting there in silence, before standing and carrying my plate into the kitchen. She was already at the sink, sleeves pushed just past her elbows, warm water running as she rinsed the dishes. A soft light glowed above her, making the room feel smaller, more private than before. "I'll help," I said, placing my plate beside her. She looked over her shoulder at me, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You don't have to. You're a guest." "Then let me be a helpful guest," I replied, and without waiting for her answer, I picked up a towel. She didn't argue. Instead, she handed me the first clean glass, her fingers brushing mine for a second longer than necessary. I felt the warmth of her skin, the softness of her touch, before she let go. It was such a simple thing, but it sent a ripple through me I couldn't ignore. For a while, we worked in silence, the steady rhythm of dishes being washed and dried, the quiet splash of water, the faint hum of the refrigerator. Every so often our shoulders bumped lightly as we moved side by side. Each time it happened, I felt my chest tighten, my breath quicken, as though the smallest contact carried a weight neither of us wanted to admit. At one point, I caught her watching me out of the corner of her eye. She quickly turned back to the sink, but the way she pressed her lips together told me she had felt it too, that same pull neither of us seemed able to resist. "Thank you," she said softly after a while, breaking the silence. Her voice was lower than usual, almost tender. "For what?" I asked. "For helping. For being considerate." She looked at me then, her eyes meeting mine fully, and in that instant the room felt impossibly still. I swallowed hard, afraid that if I spoke, my voice would betray everything I was feeling. So I only nodded, forcing a small smile as I placed another glass onto the counter. It was just the two of us in that kitchen, caught between the normalcy of a household chore and the unspoken current building in the space between us. And though neither of us said a word about it, I knew, we both knew, that something subtle, something dangerous, was quietly taking root. Later that evening, the house had settled into a quiet calm. My friend was upstairs in his room, headphones on, lost in whatever game or music had pulled him away from the world. I found myself lingering in the living room, drawn by the soft amber light spilling through the sheer curtains. The night outside was calm, the faint sound of crickets humming through the slightly open window. She entered quietly, carrying a cup of tea, and for a moment I thought she might pass through. But instead, she set it down on the small table and lowered herself onto the couch opposite mine. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was charged, alive, as though the air itself was waiting for something to happen. "You're quiet tonight," she said finally, her voice warm, curious. I shrugged lightly, trying to disguise the nervous weight pressing on my chest. "Just thinking." "About what?" I hesitated. I couldn't tell her the truth, that my thoughts were tangled around her, around the way her presence seemed to fill every space I was in. So I gave her something safer. "About the future, I guess." "What comes next?" Her expression softened, and she leaned back against the couch. "Funny. That's been on my mind too." We drifted into conversation, about choices we'd made, dreams that hadn't unfolded the way we expected, the quiet ache of regrets that still lingered. She spoke with a calm honesty, her words tinged with a maturity I admired, a weight of life experience that made me listen more closely than I ever had with anyone else. And yet, beneath the exchange of words, there was something unspoken threading between us. At one point, she laughed at a small story I told, and the sound lit up the room in a way that made my chest ache. As she leaned forward, brushing a strand of hair from her face, her hand drifted toward mine on the cushion between us. For the briefest second, her fingertips brushed against my forearm, so light, so fleeting, but the warmth of that touch lingered like a spark on my skin. She pulled back quickly, almost as if she hadn't realized what she'd done. But the look in her eyes betrayed something else, hesitation, yes, but also a quiet longing she couldn't completely hide. And in that dimly lit room, with nothing but our voices and the soft glow of evening around us, I realized the truth. Our words might have been about life, choices, and regrets, but the silence between them carried something much deeper. Something neither of us dared to confess, at least not yet. The night deepened, and with it came a sudden, unexpected hush. One moment the house was alive with the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint buzz of electricity in the walls, and the next, everything went dark. The power had cut. The silence was so complete it made my heart race. Then, a small shuffle, the sound of her footsteps. A flicker of light bloomed as she struck a match, the flame catching on a candle she placed between us on the coffee table. Its glow spread softly, painting her features in warm, shifting shadows. I don't know if it was the darkness, or the way the flame danced in her eyes, but the world outside that room seemed to vanish. It felt like it was only us, suspended in a fragile moment. She gave a nervous little laugh, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Well, looks like we'll have to survive by candlelight." I smiled, but my voice caught slightly as I answered. "Could be worse. I don't mind this." Her gaze lingered on me a moment too long, and I felt it, the silent acknowledgement of what we were both trying not to say. She shifted closer, just enough that the space between us felt charged, every breath shared. For a while, we said nothing. The candle crackled softly, filling the silence. I became hyper-aware of everything, the faint floral scent of her perfume, the warmth radiating from her presence, the sound of her breathing just inches away. Then, in almost a whisper, she spoke. "This feels dangerous." Her words slipped into the air like a secret, trembling but unshakably true. I swallowed, my chest tightening. "Then why does it feel so right?" Her eyes softened, and for a heartbeat, she didn't move. Then, slowly, her hand inched across the cushion. I felt the brush of her fingers against mine, hesitant at first, then firmer as she let them curl between my own. The contact was electric, not loud, not obvious, but powerful enough to send a shiver through me. I squeezed gently, testing, and she didn't pull away. Her thumb traced lightly across my knuckle, as if memorizing the feel of my hand. Neither of us spoke again. We didn't need to. That simple act, our hands intertwined in the fragile glow of candlelight, was louder than any words. In that moment, we crossed an invisible line. A line we could never uncross. The candle burned low, its flame steady but small, as though it too was holding its breath. Her hand was still in mine, warm, steady, and trembling all at once. But then she shifted, her fingers slipping away. She stood, pacing toward the window as if she needed air, her arms folding across her chest. I could see the conflict in her every movement, the way her shoulders rose and fell with a quiet sigh, the way she avoided looking at me for too long. "This is wrong," she whispered, almost to herself. "You're too young. I shouldn't feel this." Her words hit hard, but I couldn't stay silent anymore. My chest was aching, heavy with everything I had tried to hide. "I can't stop noticing you," I admitted, my voice low, careful. "Every glance, every moment, it feels like you've been under my skin since the first day I met you. I try to ignore it, but I can't." She turned then, her eyes glistening in the dim light. "Do you have any idea what you're saying?" Her voice trembled, not with anger, but with fear, fear of what was unfolding, fear of what it could mean. "Yes," I said, forcing myself to meet her gaze. "I do." For a long moment, the silence was unbearable. She pressed a hand to her lips, as if trying to hold back the truth. Then, finally, she spoke, her voice breaking just slightly. I feel it too. Those words hung between us like a secret finally set free. She stepped closer, slowly, cautiously, as if fighting herself with every step. My heart pounded, each beat louder than the last, until she stopped just in front of me. Her face was inches from mine, her breath soft against my skin. Her eyes searched me, hesitant, questioning, afraid, but she didn't pull back. I could see it in the way her lips parted, the way her hand hovered near my arm but didn't quite touch. And then, instead of closing the gap, she leaned her forehead against mine. The contact was gentle, trembling, but it made the world tilt. Her breath mingled with mine, our closeness unbearable, our hearts racing in unison. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered. I closed my eyes, letting the weight of her honesty sink into me. "Then don't decide tonight," I said softly. "Just, stay here. Right now. With me." She let out a shaky breath, and though the line between us remained unbroken, I felt it, the deepest confession of all. Not in words. In closeness. In silence. In the fact that she hadn't pulled away. The night had grown quiet again, the earlier tension softening into something gentler, something that no longer felt like a storm but more like the calm after it. The candle flickered low, shadows stretching across the walls as if even the house itself was holding on to this fragile moment. She pulled back slowly, her forehead no longer resting against mine, though her eyes stayed locked on me. There was so much in them, conflict, hesitation, but also a tenderness she couldn't hide anymore. She exhaled a shaky breath and shook her head lightly. "We shouldn't," and yet, her voice trailed off, the weight of the unfinished sentence hanging between us. I didn't press her. I didn't need to. Instead, I just sat there, waiting, giving her space to feel what she needed to feel. Finally, she reached for my hand again. This time, there was no trembling hesitation. Her fingers slid into mine as if they belonged there, her grip firm, warm, and filled with something unspoken. She gave it a gentle squeeze, and in that small gesture, she said more than words ever could. When the power finally flickered back on, the sudden brightness almost felt intrusive. She blinked against it, withdrawing her hand slowly, though not with regret. I stood, unsure what came next, but she offered me a soft smile that steadied me. "I'll walk you to the door," she said quietly. The hallway felt different as we moved through it together, longer, quieter, each step echoing with the weight of what we'd shared. At the door, she hesitated, her hand resting on the handle before turning to me. Her expression softened, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Maybe we shouldn't let this happen, but I don't want this feeling to go away." The honesty of her words struck me like a confession, fragile but undeniable. I leaned closer, lowering my voice to match hers. "Then let's not let it go." Her eyes searched mine for a long moment, as if she was testing whether she could trust me with this part of herself. Then, slowly, she leaned in, not for a kiss, but for something far more tender. She rested her head against my shoulder, her arms slipping lightly around me. Her embrace was steady, warm, and full of meaning. My arms moved around her in return, holding her gently, feeling the quiet steadiness of her heartbeat against my chest. It wasn't a promise of forever. It wasn't reckless passion. It was something simpler, purer. The beginning of something we both knew we could no longer ignore. And as I stepped out into the night, the memory of her touch stayed with me, an unspoken vow that this was only the start. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps me bring more slow-burn romance stories to life for you. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Would you have resisted, or held on tighter? Let me know in the comments.